two little kids sitting on a wall just waiting for the Gardaí to remove this dead body. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, please do subscribe, and if you're old here, hello again. My name's Kate Philpott, this is Sandy, and this week's case is actually an Irish case, which is exciting for me because it makes it feel more real. And I just want to let you know from the start that this is one of those cases where everyone kind of knows each other because it's set in like a rural town in Ireland. It's just best that you know that from the start because there are a lot of players and it can get a little bit confusing if you don't pay attention. And I learned that the hard way over the last few days. You might even want to go back to certain points in the video and listen again. So I'll put little timestamps in the description so that you can do that. So this is the case of Bobby Ryan, aka Mr. Moonlight, who on the 2nd of June 2011 will be taken away from his family forever. So a bit of background on Bobby Ryan. He's a 52-year-old man from Tipperary in Ireland. He worked long hours as a lorry driver in a local quarry, but part-time he actually worked as a DJ, which was kind of his passion project. That was the thing that he really loved doing, and you could tell he just glowed when he did it. He really was the life and soul of the party.
Also, this is why he was known as Mr. Moonlight, because that was his stage name. Forgot to mention that important detail.
He had a son called Robert and a daughter called Michelle, and he was so close to them. He did go through a divorce as well, but he was on good terms with his ex-wife, which is fantastic. It was all very amicable. However, he did struggle with depression and feeling quite low after the divorce. At the time of his death, Bobby Ryan was seeing this woman called Mary Lowry, who I'll tell you a little bit about in a sec. But the thing that struck me about Bobby Ryan is the fact that everybody just sang his praises. Nobody could say a bad word about him. He would never hurt anyone. According to Michelle, he was just the life and soul of the party. Everyone loved him. So a little bit about Mary Lowry. She was the daughter of a farmer and she grew up in a big family, and she met her husband Martin Lowry in Limerick. They had 3 sons together and they settled in Faunagowan in Tipperary, where they had a dairy farm. Unfortunately, in 2007, Martin Lowry was diagnosed with cancer and he went downhill pretty rapidly and unfortunately died that September, which basically just left Mary with the farm, the 3 young boys, very unsure of how to deal with all of this. But luckily, Mary had quite a good support network around her. Obviously, like I said, everyone kind of knew everyone in this town, and she was helped out by a man called Patrick Quirk. And Patrick was Martin's best friend, but also was married to Martin's sister. So you've got Mary and Martin that were married. Obviously, Martin passed away. And then you've got Patrick and Imelda who were married. And Imelda was Martin's sister. I just want to be extra clear on these details because when we get into further details of the case, I just don't want it to get too confusing. But Patrick decided to help Mary out with her investments and the farm and the accounts of the farm and all this stuff because she was just kind of like, how do I do this? Like, she had never done it before, and Patrick had dealt with those kind of things before, so it kind of just made sense. But after not too long, Patrick and Mary became a little too fond of each other, and they started an affair in 2008. So Mary was a widow at this point, but Patrick was still married to Imelda. On Mary's end, it was kind of just like, look, I'm still grieving for my husband and I haven't had a sexual relationship in a long time. And I don't think she said that to like justify it, but it was kind of the only reason that she did give. But after 2+ years, this affair started to take a toll on Mary. She was still really good friends with Imelda and she was sleeping with her husband, and it all just started to feel way too wrong for her. Like, she just felt really guilty about it and was like, this has to stop. So she tried to end it with Patrick. And I say tried because she had to try and end it several times. Patrick wasn't ready to give it up. And because of this, it wasn't exactly an amicable breakup. He didn't really take it well at all. But this is when Mary moved on to start dating someone else. And that someone else was Bobby Ryan. And this new relationship was going well. His daughter and his son were really happy that he was finally happy. But it does look like there was a little bit of an overlap between when Mary and Bobby started dating and when Mary and Patrick ended. But yeah, like I said, Patrick made this whole situation just difficult and uncomfortable for Mary. He actually went and took Mary's phone at one point, saw messages from Bobby, and then texted him from her phone saying, "I'm the man."
Toxic masculinity.
And it was around this time as well that Mary actually reported a break-in. And because of this break-in, she was obviously shaken, which fair enough, you would be. Nothing was trashed or taken from her, but she decided to get some security cameras installed. And at one point when she was reviewing security footage, she would find something rather disturbing. Patrick Quirk had been going up to her house, not just once, but on a regular basis, and peering through the windows and trying to get in. It was, of course, him that staged this break-in. And in one of these security clips, Patrick Quirk went to Mary's washing line and stole some of her underwear. So Patrick wasn't just any old ex. It was at this point when Mary cut off all ties to this guy and she terminated his lease on the land and so on and so forth. So in February of 2011, one or two things happened that were a little worrying, I guess. Patrick Quirk made a call to TUSLA, which is like a child and family agency, and basically told them that this woman called Mary Lowry was abandoning her kids at night and mistreating them and all this stuff. So, of course, a social worker came to Mary Lowry's house and checked everything out and it did come to the conclusion that everything was all good and there was no reason for concern. But it's kind of like, Patrick, dude, calm down. Also, in February of 2011, there was oh my god, an anonymous letter sent in to this agony aunt in the Sunday Independent. The agony aunt was called Patricia, so it was like a Dear Patricia letter. I won't read the whole thing because it is quite long, but I will just take a couple of quotes from it, and I suppose I'll leave a link in the description to the whole thing. But this anonymous person basically discusses how his best friend died and that he was helping out the family of his best friend to get through it and stuff like that, and that he ended up having an affair with the wife. So this best friend could be Martin, who died of cancer, and obviously the wife would be Mary. Then he says, "It lasted 3 years and came to an abrupt end recently when I found out she was seeing someone else. This someone else being Bobby Ryan." A little bit later in the letter he says, "I have no closure and I'm forced to carry this dark secret alone. I now feel a tremendous amount of grief and shame for a lost love and am possibly suffering postponed grief for a dead friend, all in silence." So this person feels burdened and not in control of their emotions and basically asks this Patricia, how do they rebuild their life? And like I said, this was an anonymous letter, but Mary Lowry even suspected that maybe Patrick Quirk wrote it. And when she confronted him about it, he said that, yeah, he did do it, and it's just because he had no one else to turn to. So he was obviously feeling incredibly alone, nobody to talk to about his heartbreak and his grief and all of the mental struggles that he was dealing with. Also, Patricia, the agony aunt, basically just told him to cop on. And that it was up to him how he moved on with his life, and basically that he should take responsibility for the fact that he was preying on this vulnerable woman that now just didn't want him anymore. Which I kind of feel like isn't the most useful advice, but however. Okay, let's fast forward to Thursday, the 2nd of June, 2011. At 5:30 p.m, Bobby came home from work and Leanne, his son's partner, was staying with them at the time. So he was in the house with Leanne, Robert, and their daughter Amy. So Bobby being the granddad. So he spent the evening with them. He was on the floor playing with Amy and they were just having a nice bit of family time. But Bobby was receiving a lot of texts from Mary. She was just blowing up his phone and he started to seem pretty agitated and, unsettled by these texts and the sheer volume of them. And it would have been really interesting to see what was actually in these texts, but I couldn't find them anywhere. But he then left to go over and see what was up with Mary. And they had a nice evening together. He got there around 10:30 p.m. and they listened to music until about 1 a.m. He then slept there and at 6:30 a.m. he planned to go home to pick up his lunchbox, work boots, that kind of thing, and then head straight to work. And normally she'd hear the sound of his van going over the cattle grid as he was leaving, but it took longer this morning. She said it took anywhere between 2 and 10 minutes, It varied. Sometimes she'd say 2 to 5, other times 5 to 10. So I guess somewhere in between 2 and 10 minutes, which is a really big range, but anyway. But she was sitting up in bed thinking, why the hell hasn't he left yet? And she eventually did hear the van leave, but once it did, Bobby Ryan was never seen alive again. So a little into that morning, Robert, Bobby's son, rang Michelle, Bobby's daughter, and said that he had been up at the quarry and didn't see their father's van there. So he never showed up to work. And he also wasn't answering his phone. So this was all really unusual for him because he would always be punctual, he was a really hard worker, and would never just not show up to work. And initially, Michelle thought maybe he's just taking the day off. But on another level, she was like, no, he wouldn't just do that. Because he was punctual and a hard worker and he wouldn't just take the day off. It was strange. So Robert wondered if maybe Bobby was sick or something. So he went to the house and Bobby wasn't there either. Robert then went to Mary Lowry's home, and when he got there, he noticed that Mary was really shaky, really upset, and just not right. And when he asked her if she had seen Bobby, all she said was, "We didn't have a fight." And Mary seemed to want him to leave ASAP. So she was acting a bit sketchy, but then later on, she denied ever acting like this at all. So it's just his word against hers. And because Robert and Michelle didn't really know where Bobby could have been, like he wasn't at home, he wasn't at work, he wasn't at Mary's house, they kind of felt like something was off. So they reported him as missing. So it was actually Michelle and her aunt that went down to report him missing. And when they did, the aunt told the police that Bobby did have a history of depression and she was concerned that maybe he had done something. Later on then, Mary Lowry called Michelle and asked to meet up. So they started searching. And Michelle didn't know why, but for some reason she just had this gut instinct to go and search the woodlands. And while they were driving there, Mary kept saying, I'm sorry, which at this point is just really strange. Like, what are you sorry for? Anyway, they went to the woods that were about 1 to 2 miles from Mary's house and they started searching. And they found Bobby's van. So this was a major red flag for them because they were like, okay, why would a person need to go to the woods to the point where they don't even show up for work that day? So Michelle just ran into the woods and she was looking for her father, screaming his name. And obviously they called the Gardaí, which if you're not from Ireland, the Gardaí is the police. And when the Gardaí arrived on the scene, they started speaking to Michelle and everything. And Michelle asked to go into Bobby's van. And there were two things that really stuck out to her about this van and how it was left there. So first of all, the van was unlocked. And Bobby would never have left his van unlocked, especially now because all of his DJ equipment was inside it. And secondly, Michelle would often drive this van and she knew that when she drove it, she didn't have to adjust the seat or anything because her and Bobby would use it at the same setting. But this time, the seat was pushed way back and she knew that Bobby was not the last person to have driven this van. So they continued to search the woods. They did this for hours. In fact, they actually did it for weeks and there was no sign of Bobby anywhere. And they were confident that he was not anywhere in the surrounding areas. There was this general underlying worry that maybe Bobby had gone off and committed suicide somewhere. But 4 days after Bobby initially disappeared, Mary Lowry's farm was searched, obviously because this was the last place he was seen alive. And Patrick Quirk gave them a helping hand because obviously he knew the farm inside and out. They came across a slurry tank, which they searched, and then the Gardaí asked him if there were any more slurry tanks. So he did show them one more, and then they searched the rest of the farm. So at this point, they've searched the whole farm, they've searched the 2 slurry pits, and they didn't search Mary's house at this point, but there was no sign of Bobby on the farm. And after a little while, it was becoming pretty clear that this wasn't a suicide, because if it was, Bobby's body would have been found. It's like the Lee Cutler case where there are theories of suicide, but a person cannot commit suicide and then hide their body. So it was looking a bit more likely that there was foul play involved. Alright, I'm going to fast forward 2 years now. So it was 22 months later, on the 30th of April 2013, and there was a body found on Mary Lowry's farm. So on this day, Patrick decided he needed this water from this slurry tank to agitate the land or something. Farming terms I'm not all that familiar with. But this was a job that he normally had someone else do for him. But when he opened up this tank, he saw something down below and he thought that it kind of looked like a body. So he rang his wife Imelda and had her come over. So Imelda comes over and pretty much confirms that this definitely looks like a body in the tank. And I do just want to say, this tank was not either of those two tanks. This was a third tank. If you'll remember, when Bobby initially disappeared and Patrick helped the Gardaí search the farm, he told them there were only 2 tanks on this farm. But here he was on this day just going about his farming business and using this third tank. So he obviously knew about it. And this tank was built in the 1970s, so it's not even like it had been built in the previous 2 years. And later on, Martin Lowry's brothers Jimmy and Johnny confirmed to authorities that Patrick knew about this third tank the whole time. I'll just leave that thought with you. So, of course, they call the Gardaí, and when they arrive, Patrick and Imelda are just there sitting on a wall. I don't know why that detail makes me laugh. I just feel like there's 2 little kids sitting on a wall just waiting for the Gardaí to remove this dead body. But one of the Gardaí noticed that Patrick was particularly clean, considering that this day he was supposed to be working with slurry on the farm. His clothes were clean, his hands were clean, and he wasn't even wearing his normal farming overalls and stuff. He was just wearing a shirt and jeans or something of that nature. And he was also noticeably quiet. But I mean, he's just found a body, hasn't he? Okay, so then they had to remove the body because this tank was an underground tank and it was very awkward to get to. But the Gardaí called the state pathologist to come and help out with this situation because this obviously was now a crime scene. They needed his expert opinion on how to move the body and everything, but he declined to attend. And I'm not exactly sure why. I feel like if that's your job, that is a situation where you probably need to just drop everything and run, but I don't know. But he said he'd examine the body the next day. So because of this, the Gardaí had to remove the body themselves. And it wasn't done perfectly, but it's hard to say because it really was an awkward maneuver because this pit was quite narrow. It was a confined space, it was underground, and in the whole mess of it, a little bit of rubble actually fell into the pit and on top of the body, which is really unfortunate. And I'm not sure if that could have been avoided. Maybe it could have, I really don't know. And also because it was so awkward to remove the body, one of the arms actually broke away in the process as well. And this next part is really upsetting. On the day that Bobby disappeared, back in 2011, Robert, Bobby's son, actually searched on this very farm. And he was searching even in the milking parlour, which was right beside this pit.
Thinking back, I won't say I was that close, but I was pretty close. I was, I was just at the other side of that milking parlour. And it haunts me to this day. Trying to go to sleep every night. And I'd be turning, tossing, screaming in bed, waving hands. Every time I close my eyes, I actually think I'm in that black hole. Scraping on them walls to get out. Because that's when Daddy was found, that's what I thought, that's what Daddy was doing. He was just thrown in there hurt and left to starve and die.
He was so close to finding him on the day he disappeared, and they had to wait 2 years for any kind of closure on whether he was dead or alive or what happened to him. Okay, so let's get into the autopsy or post-mortem. This was carried out the day after Bobby's remains were found by Dr. Khalid Jabber, who was the guy that didn't show up to the scene for some reason. Bobby had sustained injuries that were consistent with either being hit by a vehicle or being hit several times with a bat or something. So he was clearly in a very bad way. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, and he had several fractures of his skull and also fractures of his face. And it looked like the injuries probably would have taken several minutes to inflict death. There were also fractures to his ribs and his leg, but it was possible that the fracture to his rib could have been from the rubble that fell in while they were removing the body. It might not have been, but it was pretty much impossible to conclude. The issue is the opinions of Dr. Khalid Jabber, the guy who didn't show up on the day Bobby was found, and Dr. Michael Curtis, the pathologist that the defense brought forward, they differed. Their opinions differed. Dr. Khalid Jabber believed that Bobby was hit over the head with some kind of object, whereas Dr. Michael Curtis believed that Bobby was hit by some kind of vehicle. But then another expert said that if he was hit by a vehicle, he would have probably been thrown up in the air and then fallen on the ground, and he would have had the skull fractures that he did have. However, he probably wouldn't have had the fractures in his face because it's like he was hit from different angles. And it's not exactly likely that you're going to be hit more than once by a moving vehicle. And also, none of the people in question had any kind of damage on their own vehicles. And if it was a vehicle that hit him, it would have been pretty heavily dented. So about 2 weeks after Bobby was discovered, the Gardaí were questioning those who had been on the farm around the days of Bobby's disappearance. And obviously Patrick Quirk had been working there, so he was one of these people. And one of the things they asked him was why he rang Imelda before he rang the Gardaí. And I don't really know why this is a response to that question, but Patrick basically said that he knew it was Bobby as soon as he looked in there. He was like, sure, who else would it be? And that he didn't think Bobby ever left the farm because he was naked when he found him. But didn't we hear before that he rang his wife because he wasn't even 100% sure if it was a body? But he also told Gardaí at this point that he feared Mary. A week later, Patrick was questioned again, and this is when he confessed to the Gardaí that he and Mary Lowry had had an affair. He said that the reason he didn't tell them before was because his reputation was already ruined in the town and he didn't want to make it any worse. So then the investigation starts kicking in, and Patrick's computer was seized and searched. And there were some sketchy searches on his computer, let me tell you. There is evidence of Google searches on his computer to do with human decomposition, the stages of human decomposition, and that kind of stuff. There were also YouTube links in his hard drive that were about human remains, DNA analysis, and skin slippage. And when they confronted him with this evidence, he explained that he started to become more interested in this kind of stuff because his son had died from a tragic farming accident. Still a bit weird in my opinion, but everyone has their grieving process, I suppose. But they empathized with him at first and they said, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But then it didn't really line up because one of these searches was in July and his son only died in August. And to this, he didn't know how to respond. But he said that if he was guilty and knew where the body was, that he could just look into the tank to see what kind of state the body was in. But because of what they found on Patrick's computer, police then believed that they had sufficient evidence to charge Patrick Quirk with the murder of Bobby Ryan. And when this case went to trial, Mary's private life was obviously exposed a lot more than most people's private lives are in court, obviously because she was in the middle of this love triangle. But she also kind of had a motive to kill Bobby Ryan. Because the weekend before, they were out dancing and she caught Bobby dancing with some other woman or something, and there was one other instance around this time like this as well. So maybe she was the jealous one. Investigators had also found traces of blood on Mary's mattress, bed frame, wardrobe, and one of the light fittings in the living room. And she was absolutely laid into by Patrick Quirk's defense because she could be a reason that there is reasonable doubt to consider him not guilty of this crime, if that makes sense. And when she was being cross-examined, obviously she was under a lot of pressure, and this pressure forced her to admit that she and Patrick Quirk had met up long after Bobby had disappeared. And they spent a night together in Dublin. where they went to a play in the Olympia Theatre, which is so weird because I've been there several times, and they stayed together in a hotel. This was in 2012, so it was after Bobby disappeared, but before any remains were found. But Mary says that she doesn't remember a whole lot about that night because she got really drunk. She claimed that she got drunk because she didn't want to be there, and she only met up with Patrick to kind of shut him up, and he was pestering her, and she just said, okay, maybe I can go meet up with him and clear the air. And she also claims that they were not intimate on this night away. She did also say that this was the only time she had met up with Patrick after Bobby disappeared. But when she was asked if she had stayed in the Cliff House Hotel in Waterford at any point, she said no. But then she was confronted with the information that there had been a reservation made under Patrick's name and linked to her email address after Bobby disappeared. There was also a transaction from her bank account for the exact amount of money on that exact date as well. And when she was questioned about this, she explained that, well, Patrick Quirk had access to her house at this time, so he probably had access to her computer and booked it from her computer with her bank details and all this kind of stuff. And they were kind of like, really? Like, why would he do that? Would he do it to set it up for this exact moment in court? Well, unlikely, because he didn't know that she was going to say they'd only met up once. Was it so that he could use her money instead of his own? Well, also unlikely, because why would he also use her email address? Would he not use his own email address? But then maybe he could use her email address so that he would have access to it, and not have his name associated with it, or so. I don't know. All in all, it just seems kind of unlikely that she had no idea about it. Mary Lowry had also received a text a couple months after Bobby's disappearance saying, "You think you're cool out partying like Bobby never existed. We know you hiding something, and we are going to watch you until you crack." Creepy. But because this was from so long ago, they couldn't actually find who this text came from, which is really unfortunate. Did someone know something that we don't? Or was this just an empty threat? Another witness was brought up to testify, and she said that Mary Lowry had called her out of the blue and asked her about fingerprints and if Gardaí would know if there was a body in the back of a car. When Mary was confronted with this, she said it was highly unlikely that she ever said that, which I always find it really interesting when people say it was highly unlikely that they said something. I'm like, well, do you not remember? I feel like that's a conversation you would remember. So the reason I'm bringing all this up, I know it doesn't exactly say much about being a murderer or whatever, but Mary just isn't exactly an angel in this situation. But another interesting thing about Mary Lowry was her computer was also used to search Bobby Ryan missing, Bobby Ryan Tipperary, and Trace Ireland Bobby Ryan in the few days leading up to Bobby Ryan's body being found. I can understand her being interested in the case because she was the last person to see him, she was dating him. But is it a coincidence that it just happened literally days before he was found when he had been missing for 2 years? Maybe, maybe not. It is just a little freaky. Fuck. Jesus. So then something really interesting and really clever was done. Dr. Khalid Jabber reserved an insect that was on Bobby Ryan's body. They found that this particular type of fly was attracted to a chemical that's released by the body after you die. And basically that showed them that there had been access to the tank 2 to 8 weeks before Bobby's body was found, which suggested that Patrick Quirk had staged the scene of finding this body. Because how could this tank be opened by anybody 2 to 8 weeks prior and them not finding a body, and then Patrick just finds the body, you know? But Patrick explained this away by saying that there was some kind of drainage issue and leakage into the tank from the milk parlour, and that's how it caused access to the slurry tank, and that's how the fly got in. And experts did confirm that this could have been possible with the way the land was, but it is definitely interesting that that happened, especially with the type of searches on his computer and everything. And the fact that he said, like, if I wanted to see what the body was like and I knew where it was, I could just go and look at it. Well, what if he actually did? Huh? My coffee is going cold and I need to pee. But like, I can't leave it because then I'll be horrible when I come back. At the trial as well, another witness testified that Patrick Quirk had still been milking the cows at 9:30 a.m. on the morning that Bobby Ryan disappeared. And she said that normally he would be finished milking the cows at this point, he'd be all cleaned up, the place would be spotless, and he'd be on his way to have his breakfast. So obviously something held him up that morning. What could he possibly have been doing? And this other guy, this farmhand, testified that Patrick Quirk had asked him to help him seal this third tank
where Bobby Ryan's remains were eventually found
on the morning that Bobby Ryan disappeared. And the reason he gave was that a calf had injured its leg or something in the gap, so he needed it sealed. So now we have Patrick Quirk with no alibi, access to and a knowledge of the third tank that he claimed not to know about, a motive to kill Bobby Ryan, as well as being suggested to have sealed the tank that Bobby Ryan's remains were found in 22 months later by him. But then this note was found in Patrick Quirk's home, and it was basically like trying to make Mary look guilty. So it said things like, Mary last one to see him, ? How did she find his van so quickly? Why did she look for him in a place that she knew he wouldn't have needed to go? Why did she have varying accounts of how long he was out the front before he left for work? 2 minutes or 10 minutes? And it just had all these questions about how Mary was the real suspicious one here, which in itself might be another reason that he looks guilty. But then again, you could also argue that he might have done this if he was innocent as well. But also on this piece of paper, there were indents found from a note that had been written like over top of it, and they kind of got bits of messages. So what they got was, we need blank dispose of clothes / phone / any other evidence, body naked, ... never left house. So it kind of looks like he's plotting this cover up. Like, I'm not exactly sure why else he would be writing these things down. And by the way, this trial only took place last year in 2019. So it is quite recent. On the 23rd of April 2019, the jury started their deliberations. And on the 1st of May 2019, they had their verdict. Patrick Quirk was found guilty of the murder of Bobby Ryan with a majority verdict of 10-2, and he was sentenced to life in prison. And there was this gorgeous clip of Robert and Michelle coming out of court that day with Bobby Ryan's picture, and they had their arms around each other, and you can just tell, I mean, I'm sure it was bittersweet. They were smiling but emotional. Obviously, justice had been served, but they weren't going to get their dad back. Patrick Quirk just had this selfish moment and took Bobby Ryan away from his adoring family. So let's conclude. Obviously, in this case, there was no DNA, there was no fingerprints, there was no physical evidence to necessarily link Patrick Quirk to the murder of Bobby Ryan. It was all circumstantial evidence, but there was a lot of it. If we look at Patrick, he was clearly struggling with mental anguish, and he was very jealous of Bobby Ryan, and he wanted to rekindle his affair with Mary. He had no alibi on the day of Bobby's disappearance. He was said to be sealing the tank that Bobby's remains were found in on the morning that Bobby disappeared. This tank that he originally claimed didn't exist or that he didn't know about. When he found Bobby, he was supposed to be working with slurry that day, which is a very messy, dirty job. But when the Gardaí arrived, he was totally clean and totally spotless. He had written and disposed of a note that looked like he was plotting the cover-up of this murder. He possibly opened this tank in the weeks leading up to him discovering the body. He had several inconsistent statements, such as saying that he rang his wife before the Gardaí because he didn't even know if it was a body at all. But then he said, as soon as I saw the body, I knew it was Bobby, because who else would it be? It's like, and again, none of these things individually would point to him being a murderer, but when you put them all together, it really pieces together a story, and I believe it is very telling. Very similar to George Hodel in the Black Dahlia case, which I covered last week. Just to conclude about Mary, what was up with her? Something's telling me that she knew something. She was upset and shaky the morning Bobby disappeared. She instantly said we didn't have a fight when Robert asked her if she had seen Bobby, which is just a weird reaction. She did have a motive, although in my opinion it is kind of a weaker motive than Patrick's motive, but Bobby had been dancing with another woman only the week before. That led to them having a bit of a fight. She could have been the jealous one. Also, it was on her farm, so for 22 months she lived less than 100 yards away from Bobby Ryan's body. Obviously, there were traces of blood found in her home, and like with the type of death that Bobby Ryan had suffered, it would have been quite a bloody scene. So how do we know that all of this blood was gone from the scene? You know, I don't know. Possibly lying about going to the Cliff House Hotel with Patrick. If she could lie about this, couldn't she easily lie about something else? Also, asking people about fingerprints and if Gardaí are going to find evidence of a body having been in the back of a car. So, all in all, Mary looks like a very sketchy individual, but not quite to the point of murder. If you ask me, and I could be wrong, but I don't believe it's beyond the realms of possibility that she could have known something about this murder. I definitely think that it's possible she knew a lot more than she let on. It's just speculation, but I will just leave that thought with you. And lastly, I do just want to ask the question, like, did Imelda know something? Imelda being Patrick's wife? Is it possible that she helped cover it up? Because why was she the first one that Patrick called that morning when he found the body? They would have had time to potentially go over the plan of action if that was the case. Again, it's just speculation, but I just don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility. Also, I haven't really mentioned her much in this video, but Bobby's ex-wife did come forward to the media to say that she was absolutely tormented over the fact that if she and Bobby were still together, he would probably still be alive today. And I just think like it must be really hard knowing that that is a possibility, but also I just feel like, no, who could have ever thought that this would have been a possibility? The only people that should feel any kind of guilt are the people that were involved, that did something or that covered it up, if there were people covering it up. You know, I just feel like, oh, that poor family, that poor woman. Like, I get where she's coming from, but you didn't do anything wrong. Oh, I'm getting all worked up here.
We can't look forward to anything because the whole room could be full. But the one person that we want there, you know, isn't. The last time I was with him, it was like somebody up there was telling us, this is going to be your last time together. You're never going to have another night like this. He put on Tina Turner, Proud Mary, and he was there, come on Shelley, sing the song. And I did, and his two jaws, they just lit up and the tears were coming out his eyes from laughing. And that was the last time that I was ever going to dance for Daddy or sing with him again. The following Friday he was gone. Yeah.
That brings me to the end of this case. It's always really interesting for me to cover Irish cases because with American and British cases, obviously, I'm so used to hearing American and British accents on Netflix, on TV, and in all these fictional programs. But to hear the Irish accent, specifically the Tipperary, that thick country Irish accent, it just makes it so much more real for me. I don't know if that makes sense, but to the family of Bobby Ryan, my heart is with you. I'm so glad that justice was served, but I am so heartbroken for them that they're not going to get Bobby Ryan back. But luckily, Patrick Quirk will never hurt another innocent person again. But thank you so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy it, please give me a like and leave a comment down below. I would love to know if you also agree with the theories that I've put forward about Mary and potentially Imelda.
This is Editing Kate here. Just on that note, Michelle Ryan has come out to say that she believes Patrick Quirk did not act alone. So as far as she's concerned, justice is only 50% served.
Another question I'd love to ask you, do you think Patrick definitely did it? Because there isn't any DNA evidence linking him to it, but there's just a hell of a lot of circumstantial evidence. So what is your opinion on that? Also, don't forget to turn on the notifications so you don't miss an upload of mine. I upload every Friday at 3 p.m. And I also have a case suggestion form, which I'll leave in the description. So any requests you have, any kind of cases, any like something different, and just have a great day. I'm sending you lots of love, lots of positivity and happiness and joy and unicorns and rainbows because there's just not enough happiness and positivity in the world right now. So if I can give some to you, then here you go. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!